3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill on 710 WOR.
Welcome. I'm Jeffrey Hill, your host right here on 710 WOR Radio in New York City. With me is my producer, Flipsinator.
What's going on?
Excited to see you, my friend.
Sad week this week.
Yeah.
With Kobe passing.
Yeah. I wanted to say a little something about that. So it has literally stopped almost the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's every news channel. Everybody has
internationally, though, too,
Everyone,
right?
yep.
I mean,
Yeah,
China. There's a whole there's a thing going on in China right now. There's a thing going on in Europe right now. There's soccer teams that are stopping in the middle of a game.
Yeah, teams are taking 24-second violations and 8-second violations.
The whole thing is remarkable. When you think about it, there's so many things that Kobe accomplished in his life, but I just wanted to highlight one thing, and that is what he's bringing to women, the women's game, and girls' self-esteem at a very young age. Of course, everybody probably knows that by now, especially, that Kobe had 3 girls, right? 3 girls plus his wife. So there's 4 of them. And, of course, he lost one of them, Gianna, in the crash with him. I myself have 2 daughters. Both played girls basketball when they were very young. Having someone of Kobe's...
He's actually got 4 kids.
4 kids, I'm sorry. So having someone of Kobe's reputation supporting the game, really makes an amazing difference. So he's going to be missed at any number of levels. But what the Women's Basketball League has done for young girls is absolutely astounding. The same high school that my kids went to, where girls basketball was thought of as a very secondary sport, has now really rethought itself because of, not only WNBA, but a lot of what Kobe brought in the way of reputation, his reputation, to make it even more real.
And you see his daughter, UConn, made her a part of the school. Yeah, no, she's a UConn, forever.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely unbelievable, and such a shame. I mean, everybody said this already. I mean, but the guy made a much bigger mark, I think, than any of us knew, and it's a shame that people have to pass away before you can really evaluate the contribution that they've made, and ultimately the contribution they could have made.
Yeah.
All right, let's
Especially
move on.
him. He won an Oscar right when he retired.
Even more amazing, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw that. That's a short he did on. It's
a basketball
basically it's
one.
about thank you basketball.
Yeah.
It's a goodbye basketball, I think. And he basically talks about what the sport meant to him. And it's an emotional letter to the sport, effectively, that some artist did like black and white drawings around. It got turned into a video, and that video won an Academy Award. Yep. It's absolutely remarkable. You ought to listen to it if you can. All right, let's tell the folks how they can find us. We're available right here every Sunday at 8 a.m. on 710 WOR in New York City. The show then becomes a podcast on virtually all podcast sites, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. We also have a YouTube channel and a full social round as well, all at NYCBD Official. All right, there are 4 segments of our show that we do every week. The first segment is called Cannabis in the Tri-State Plus One, and the plus one, of course, is Massachusetts, where I will update you on key cannabis issues in all 4 states. The second segment is called Stunning and Amazing Facts, what I consider to be the most relevant issues outside of these 4 states that could be global indeed. Our third segment we call Our Guest. And today we are thrilled again to have Jay back with us, Jay Contessa. Recall Jay agreed to participate on the show when he can. He's running the ambassador effort for our CB delivery business as a partner. And recall he spent 30 years of his career as a senior sales and marketing executive with firms like CPG, consumer packaged goods firms like Unilever. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Yeah, great to
be back,
back,
I should say
Jeff.
Welcome back.
Yeah, well,
I guess one of these days, if I get ill, we're going to let you run the show. I think you're probably better than I am. And by the way, you're much more attractive on YouTube as well. Right. All right. In addition, we have another intriguing guest whose name is Charles McElroy. Charlie is the founder of Goldleaf, a science-forward printing and education company supporting the cannabis space. Goldleaf is an excellent example of what many of you asked for, which is a non-plant touching business that is doing really quite well. He's a former volunteer with the Marijuana Policy Project and has a history of supporting veterans' education, especially around the issue of PTSD. As you'll hear later on when we introduce Charlie, he's had many of his own family as veterans, and many of whom were struggling with issues, and they found cannabis to be very important to him, which helped motivate him to get into the space. Lastly, we will end with our fourth segment called Your Messages, providing answers to the most interesting direct messages we received following last week's show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with our first segment, Cannabis in the Tri-State +1, right after this.
Are you waking up the day after a workout, tennis match, or even a long walk just feeling it? Introducing CBDeliveryNY.com to help you live the life you know you can. They carry superior CBD made from the highest quality hemp, grown and harvested under the strictest regulations. Their sales force, certified trainers, physical therapists, and yoga teachers, all of whom have gone through rigorous education, helping them to understand what the power of plants can do for your overall wellness. So start 2020 off right. Try one of their New Year's product bundles. Go to CBDeliveryNY.com. That's CBDeliveryNY.com to find out what the power of plants can do for you.
Welcome back to NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill right here on 710 WOR Radio. Don't forget, we have a blog called medium.com/@JeffreyHill2. That's medium.com/@JeffreyHill2. And that blog takes you deeper into many of the issues we begin to touch on in the show. All right, let's move to the first segment, Cannabis in the Tri-State +1. And let's begin, as we always do, with New York, whose state lawmakers say they are optimistic about a law to regulate and tax recreational marijuana, and it will be enacted in the coming months, perhaps as part of a new state budget that must be adopted by April. Governor Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat... Every week we mention Cuomo, and every week Flipsy gives us the ugh, okay? Clearly defining his point of view here.
Until he does something.
Okay, well, there you go. Well, here's something he's trying to work on. Governor Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat, of course, once again included language legalizing marijuana in spending legislation introduced just last week. A poll also released last week showed a record margin of public support for legalization. Quote, let's be frank, we can buy this in any high school in New York State. The marketplace has spoken, so it's time we tax this and can put that money to a social good, said State Senator Peter Harkman, a Democrat from Westchester County. Mr. Harkman was one of several Democratic senators who last year were reluctant to embrace marijuana legislation. In recent months, Mr. Harkman said he had traveled to Massachusetts, where marijuana is sold in retail stores, and found, quote, the sky is not falling, close quote.
Did you just advertise you could buy it in high school?
Yeah. All right, so let's talk for a minute about our friend Mr. Harkman and what I would consider to be his less than authentic point of view on the space, all right? Our view of the space, my view of the space, and most of the folks that I know that are involved in this space look at the space as maybe one of the most important things that's happened to healthcare in the last 100 years. And don't forget, prior to 1938, cannabis was prescribed by almost all doctors in a significant I'll call it pharmaceutical product, which is really a plant, by the way, for various ailments like epilepsy, depression, pain, anxiety, and a whole host of other things, right? We've talked that countless times on the show. So to have somebody that's got the kind of position that this gentleman has refer to it as, okay, they're doing it anyway, let's make some money at it, I think is an incredible misuse of the space. Jay, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, this is just follow the money, right? Everybody in Westchester County is getting in the car and going up to Massachusetts and, in buying. And there they are in Westchester County looking for those tax dollars. It's the same thing with New York, right? That's what the governor's figured out. Right.
Now, I don't disagree that the tax component of this is a very compelling piece, right? Yeah. And, the numbers that our friend Governor Cuomo, no please, has discussed.
Only once a show.
He's now basically got it down to earth, right? So what I mean by down to earth is he was talking about $400 million 2 years ago. Then he talked about $300 million last year. Now he's talking about $21 million this year, going up to $140 million. That seems reasonable. If you tax the space at 10 to 15% plus local municipal taxes, right, that translates to a revenue number that seems reasonable. All right, so those are the numbers that you could probably count on. And yes, New York needs those numbers. Every time I come down here to shoot the show, I get on the subway, and I'd like to see at least a penny or two go in to help refurbish some of these subways.
That'd be nice.
It would be. All right, let's move on to New Jersey.
Maybe get rid of the smell.
Nothing has really changed in New Jersey as the State House has decided to move to referendum in November to formally decide the status of adult use. But a very interesting case is going on I wanted to bring to your attention. For New Jersey employers, it's time to sit up and take notice of how medical marijuana may affect your human resource policies in the wake of a recent disability discrimination lawsuit against who? Against Amazon. The case has relevant employment law written all over it. What do I mean by that? The suit was filed in October of 2019 in Middlesex County by a former Amazon employee working at its Edison warehouse who was terminated for testing positive for marijuana in July of 18. The employee was lawfully registered with the state's medical marijuana program. Following the positive test result, the employee advised Amazon of his status in the program. Like many other New Jersey residents, he was using the substance to treat a medical disability. In his case, it was anxiety and panic disorder. Based on his disability, the employee submitted paperwork to Amazon requesting a reasonable accommodation for use of medical marijuana. However, at the time of the employee's request for an accommodation, which was 16 months ago, an employer's legal obligation in this situation was not crystal clear and remains so today. In July of 18, New Jersey's disability discrimination laws did not seem to obligate an employer to provide accommodations for employees' use of medical marijuana. Given that interpretation, Amazon terminated the employee. This occurred despite the employee providing the requested documentation directly to Amazon. So less than a year later, in March of 19, the New Jersey Appellate Division ruled that an employer may have an obligation to reasonably accommodate an employee using medical marijuana. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Amazon's 2018 termination decision will now be judged in accordance with a legal precedent set when? 2019, further muddying the legal waters. An appellate division's March 2019 decision has been appealed to the New Jersey Supreme Court, which is not yet ruled. One thing is indeed clear going forward. All New Jersey employers must comply with the requirements of the Jake Honig Compassionate Use Medicinal Cannabis Act, which was signed into law in 2019, and it prohibits employers from taking adverse employment actions against employees solely based on their status as medical marijuana patients. All right, 2 minutes of discussion on this. Once again, the law is kind of slow in developing, right? They refer to it as medicinally legal in the state of New Jersey. Doctors then can prescribe this product. People have anxiety, depression, and other disorders in the workplace. At no time would anybody be challenged by their employer for taking a classic pharmaceutical product that they had to take 3 times a day. So they go to the bathroom and they take a couple of pills and they move on, or they have to take it at lunch or something like that. So ask yourself the question, why is this happening? All right? And part of the reason it's happening is because the law is iterative. 1 year, it's one thing, then it gets adjusted, then it gets adjusted yet again. All right? Keep in mind, New Jersey is still the state that is going to go to public referendum where 75% of the state has already said in many surveys that they're going to vote yes for adult use, right? And yet they are arresting, as I say every single week, 600 people a week for cannabis-only offenses. Incredible. Let's move to Connecticut. When Connecticut's legislature convenes for its 2020 activity, top lawmakers say marijuana legalization will be a priority. While legislation to legalize cannabis for adult use in the state advanced in several committees last year, disagreements about certain provisions, such as how to allocate revenue, ultimately derailed those efforts. This time around, however, the General Assembly is positioned to build on those bills and craft a passable measure. That's according to Senate President Pro Temp Martin Looney. We are revisiting legalizing recreational cannabis because we see that most of our neighbors, states that have already done so prior to us, or going to do it this year, Looney said. We clearly need additional revenue, and anecdotally, we hear about people who travel to Massachusetts to purchase it. This goes back to what Jay was saying, right? People are going across the border in droves to pick up product in Massachusetts. I used to live in a house in upstate New York, in New Lebanon, indeed, 6 miles from Pittsfield. Well, Pittsfield has a dispensary. So any number of people from New Lebanon are going there, purchasing their product, paying their taxes, getting medicinal product or recreational product, and bringing it back across the state line to use. All right, so what happens? 1, the state of Massachusetts benefits, the state of New York does not benefit. 2, as that person brings it across the state, they are subject to DEA and FBI enforcement regulations, and they are subject to 7 to 10 years in jail and up to a $10 million fine. Let me repeat that. 7 to 10 years in jail and a multi-million-dollar fine. Your thoughts, Jay?
Yeah, and I agree. It's insane. Even the regulations that you're mentioning or the penalties, I don't think a consumer has any idea that that's a penalty.
Yeah, in other words, cross the state line.
Yeah,
right.
They do it every day for
right.
other things, especially like New Hampshire or things like that where there's no tax. So a lot of people go and do their shopping up there, so they don't have to pay tax. They're not arrested. They're not.
Yeah.
But
when I was living in my house,
I'm going to do 10 years in jail because I went to a legal place.
I got my groceries. I stopped at CVS. I stopped at the dispensary. I picked up a few medicinal items, which, by the way, were recommended to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
I came across a state line where there's no reciprocity, and I could end up in jail.
Right.
Absolutely stunning. All right, let's look at what Governor Ned Lamont had to say. He's been having ongoing conversations with the governors of neighboring states and about coordinating a regional legalization effort. And he's pushing the legislature to pursue the policy change directly in the coming 3-month session. He's stressing the importance of regulating cannabis to disrupt the illicit market. All right, I don't disagree with that either, all right? Because when you are not legal, you open the door for the illicit market. It's going to happen one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
So the illicit market now basically is providing that product with modest, if any, regulation. I'll call it no regulation, except for whatever the individuals are trying to accomplish, right? The state's not generating any incremental revenue, and yet consumers pretty much are finding the product one way or the other.
Right.
All right, here's one other thought, ladies and gentlemen, before we move off Connecticut. We haven't picked on Connecticut for a while, and I got a lot of friends that live up there, so I thought I would spend a little bit of time here.
Yeah.
The state now has 29 qualifying conditions for prescribing cannabis to adults and 8 conditions for prescribing it to kids under 18. So without going into all 29, since Flips over here was going to fall off the back of his seat sound asleep, let me just say that lateral sclerosis, cancer, cerebral palsy, Crohn's disease, cerebral palsy, that is, not policy, cystic fibrosis, epilepsy, fibromyalgia, by the way, Morgan Freeman has that problem, intractable headache syndromes, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, the Michael J. Fox disease, and on and on and on are all part of the 29 agreed to for adult use. And then among kids, there's 8 of them. Well, ask yourself the question, by the way, what's left out? Well, cancer's left out, Crohn's is left out, and migraines is left out. So if I have a child with Crohn's, migraines, or cancer in the state of Connecticut, I can't get product. But if I'm over 18 and I have those 3 diseases, I can get product. I'm sure that makes sense to somebody. I'm just not sure who. There is not a lot of news in Massachusetts, so I've decided to make some predictions in 2020 in the Commonwealth state. Here are my top 5. First, frustrations over the lack of equity will boil over. There's just no other way to say it. Despite a lot of talk, well-crafted policies on paper, and good intentions, Massachusetts has very little to show so far for its efforts to create an equitable cannabis industry that reflects the racist reality of the historical war on drugs. As of mid-November, just 6 of 227 licenses granted by the Cannabis Control Commission had gone to entrepreneurs in the state's social equity and economic empowerment programs. The rest of the sector is dominated by larger multi-state operators. Second prediction, big pot companies will engage in alcohol industry-style pay-to-play tactics. In 2019, Big Cannabis was trying to control seemingly independent retailers through onerous loans and management agreements, unsuccessful attempts to bypass the state's 3 retail license cap. In 2020, I predict we'll see many attempts by larger players to arrive at the same end, which is retail domination, by different means, specifically a supply agreement with so-called pay-to-play clauses. Imagine this. You own an independent marijuana retail shop that doesn't grow or manufacture its own products. A grower comes to you and says, hey, I'll wholesale you a bunch of flour at a steep discount if you dump those products you've stocked of our competitors, right? This exists in all of consumer packaged goods, regardless if it's food, drug, mass, or convenience stores. Is that not right, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, this is the 1970s all coming back.
Right, so this is classic, right? So a lot of large consumer packaged goods companies used to try to flex their muscles with all kinds of programmatic work, accrual programs, and other things that said the more SKUs, the more stock-keeping units, the items or flavors that you carry of mine, the more money you will make on every case. Well, that benefits large companies to the disadvantage of small companies who get, quote, elbowed out of the way. All right, let's move on. Third prediction, anti-cannabis driving legislation will pass, but the state legislature won't do much else on marijuana. As the marijuana market gets bigger and the advent of delivery and social consumption businesses inch closer in Massachusetts, proponents of tough anti-cannabis driving measures like the one proposed by Charlie Baker, the governor, will continue to accumulate ammo and momentum. I think the state Senate will insert some modest revisions aimed at placating civil rights groups, but Baker will more or less get his bill through and call it a win for public safety. Fourth prediction, the lab backlog will become a serious problem. Operators are already grumbling about growing wait times at the state's only 2 labs that are licensed to test recreational products. If more aren't approved soon and additional suppliers continue to get licenses, the problem will get even worse. Imagine that as a backlog, right? It's like a pipeline. Everybody's trying to get in and only few are getting through, all right? Consumers will start to take notice when their favorite shops start openly blaming the lab shortage for lack of products on the shelf. And what does that do? Well, perhaps that sends them to the black market, right? Fifth prediction, CBD will remain a muddle. The state and federal government will continue to drag their feet in developing regulations for edibles containing hemp-driven CBD. Much to the consternation of licensed local hemp farmers who are watching their crops rot while unregulated product proliferate at gas stations. You understand what I'm saying, right? So the state of Massachusetts said, yes, we're in support of CBD. Yes, we're in support of hemp. Okay, out go the farmers. They produce the hemp. They change their farms over from whatever, corn, tomatoes, what have you, selling it for $15,000-ish an acre. That would be good. And they converted it over to hemp where they thought they were going to make $35,000 an acre. That would be better, right? Flips, thoughts on that? 35 better than 15?
Way better.
You're darn right it is. All right, then guess what happens?
If you can sell it.
Right, there you go. So thank you, Jay. So then what happens is they put a kibosh on CBD sales,
I know some
edibles,
people.
the vape, and other things. Right. So what's happening now? Farmers can't sell it. And then what's happening? Well, perhaps some bankruptcies. I've seen any number of farmers in Western Mass who are having nothing but problems. All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. My thoughts on the critical issues in the tri-state, plus my predictions in Massachusetts. When we come back, we'll move on to our next segment, Stunning and Amazing Facts, right after this.
Are you waking up the day after a workout, tennis match, or even a long walk just feeling it? Introducing CBDeliveryNY.com to help you live the life you know you can. They carry superior CBD made from the highest quality hemp, grown and harvested under the strictest regulations. Their sales force, certified trainers, physical therapists, and yoga teachers, all of whom have gone through rigorous education, helping them to understand what the power of plants can do for your overall wellness. So start 2020 off right. Try one of their New Year's product bundles. Go to CBDeliveryNY.com. That's CBDeliveryNY.com to find out what the power of plants can do for you.
Welcome back to NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill right here on 710 WOR Radio. Right after the show, we become a podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Spotify. We also have full social media and a YouTube station, all at NYCBD Official. All right, let's move on to the next segment of our show, Stunning and Amazing Facts, with our first Stunner. There continues to be a steady flow of funding for academic research in the space, mostly from cannabis companies. Colorado State University graduate and CEO of medical cannabis company Panacea Life Sciences, Leslie Butorf, has given $1.5 million to her alma mater for cannabis research. Jan Nerger, Dean of the College of Natural Sciences, said the gift will give unprecedented opportunities for the college's faculty and students. The university plans to use the funds to create a CBD research center within the chemistry building and study terpene profiles in an effort to advance cannabinoid efficacy to treat both human and animal ailments. Last year, Seth and Eric Crawford, the founders of Oregon CBD, donated $1 million to Oregon State University's Global Hemp Innovation Center. That program was also recently bolstered by a $2.5 million federal funding. Medical cannabis firm Primitive, co-owned by former Detroit Lions Calvin Johnson and Rob Sims, also made an undisclosed six-figure donation to Harvard's Phytomedicines and Medical Cannabis Institute last year to research the effects of cannabis on chronic traumatic encephalopathy, also known as CTE, and pain management. Don't forget the conversation we had about the Broderick Fund on our third show, where he invested $9 million, half to MIT and half to Harvard. The Harvard researchers want to truly assess if THC, the psychoactive cannabidiol in marijuana, improves cognitive function in people with schizophrenia. They're also looking at how THC, as well as another key cannabidiol, CBD, affect cognition alone and in combination. MIT indicated they're going to study marijuana impact on autism and Huntington's disease, as well as how marijuana can impact attention and working memory. So I'd like to say that the space, at least from an academic perspective, continues to become more and more real. There are now 2 schools where you can earn a 4-year degree, Northern Michigan University in Marquette and Minot State University in Minot, North Dakota, which both offer bachelor's degrees in the space, and it goes on and on from there. There are legal schools now offering marijuana law policy classes like the Vanderbilt Law School, and there are many other schools that are increasingly involving themselves in the space. All right, let's move on. Next stunner. Adult use legalization prospects, which we already discussed in the tri-state plus Massachusetts, looks very real in many other states. Vermont, New Mexico, South Dakota, Arizona, Montana, Pennsylvania, and Florida are all moving to adult use. Had we had more time, I could get into individual discussions about each state, but Flipsy's given me the high sign here, which says, please don't. So we will listen to your very specific direction and move forward. However, if you want to hear more about...
Going to be in the blog.
Yeah, go to the blog, medium.com/@JeffreyHill2, and you'll see a lot more detail. All right, in terms of medical cannabis legalization prospects, there's several states, including Alabama, long known as one of the most conservative states in the nation. They're actually one of the more likely to pass a medical cannabis program via its legislature in 2020. A study commission approved a draft bill that would legalize marijuana for diagnosed medical conditions but prohibit smokable flower and edibles. Mississippi, South Dakota, and Kentucky all look like they're going to move forward. Let me just spend a moment on Kentucky. The home of U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has remained focused on cultivating a large hemp industry, but in a step toward legalizing medical cannabis, the state House Judiciary Committee approved a marijuana bill in 2019. Could the full legislature embrace the idea? I guess we'll have to wait and see. You may recall that our friend Mr. McConnell has taken a very strong position. He's in favor of hemp and therefore CBD, but he refers to the other illegal stepbrother as something he's not comfortable with. Thoughts on that?
He's also currently a little busy right now.
He is a little busy, perhaps with some of the Trump discussion. Yeah. Jay, your thoughts?
No, I agree with Flipsy. He's got his hands
He's
full
a busy man
now.
right now. Will they have witnesses or won't they? Seems to be the order of the day.
True.
All right. That completes the stunning and amazing facts section of our show. When we come back, it'll be my pleasure to introduce Charles McElroy, CEO of Goldleaf, a very exciting company in the cannabis space. So come on right back.
Are you waking up the day after a workout, tennis match, or even a long walk just feeling it? Introducing CBDeliveryNY.com to help you live the life you know you can. They carry superior CBD made from the highest quality hemp, grown and harvested under the strictest regulations. Their sales force, certified trainers, physical therapists, and yoga teachers, all of whom have gone through rigorous education, helping them to understand what the power of plants can do for your overall wellness. So start 2020 off right. Try one of their New Year's product bundles. Go to CBDeliveryNY.com. That's CBDeliveryNY.com to find out what the power of plants can do for you.
Welcome back to NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill, right here on 710 WOR Radio every Sunday at 8 a.m. As you all know, we're available as a podcast on virtually all podcast sites like iHeartRadio, iTunes, or Spotify. We have a full social media campaign, and we're also on YouTube. All can be found at NYCBD Official. That's at NYCBD Official. All right, let's move on to the next segment of our show, today's guests. It is my pleasure to introduce Charles McElroy, the founder of Goldleaf, a science-forward printing and education company supporting the cannabis space. Goldleaf is an excellent example of a non-plant touching business, which many of you have been asking me to learn more about. Charlie is a former volunteer with the Marijuana Policy Project, which Hilly will explain, and has a history of supporting veterans' education and access to marijuana. Charlie also studied advanced farming techniques, so he is very familiar with the space. Welcome to the show, Charlie. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Happy to be here.
All right, we are thrilled because you kind of bring to the table something that none of these listeners have heard of before, an interesting business, a non-plant touching business, which is, I think, adding some tremendous value. So before we get into the specifics, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the cannabis space, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, like so many in this space, I didn't, I came from kind of a varied background. So my initial exposure to cannabis was, I guess, maybe around the age of 19. I wasn't really a big user, but I was kind of learning about, the history behind it. I had family who utilized it medicinally, and I kind of just started learning about the misinformation and oppression of the plant and people that kind of surround cannabis, and it struck a real chord with me. It all seemed so illogical and even immoral, and those feelings of frustration were kind of a motivator for me to learn more and kind of get more into this industry. I came up with the idea of Goldleaf, which is intentionally an ancillary business. I wanted to keep 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the cannabis industry. I'm really passionate about communication and design, and I felt like by having an ancillary business, I would be better suited to kind of push the narrative of a healthier industry and a better understanding of cannabis. I also felt that it was more, we were more able to kind of clearly point out some of the nonsense of the rules and regulations surrounding cannabis, and hopefully move the needle in a positive direction.
Great.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you to elaborate a little bit. You mentioned that you had some additional experience, perhaps some family members, etc. And I think, the audience is always interested to hear how we all arrived in the space. Maybe you could elaborate on that just a little bit, if you would, please.
Yeah, happy to. My exposure to cannabis was mostly from the medicinal standpoint. Pretty much all of my uncles were veterans. I say were because they're not with us anymore. But they all fought in Vietnam, and one of my uncles, Uncle Don, had leukemia from Agent Orange, and both of my uncles had signs of what we now know as PTSD from their service. They had been utilizing cannabis before it was, as kind of ubiquitous as it's become for this type of treatment. So I was, sort of exposed to it at a young age, not in any dangerous sorts of ways. Just, there's your uncle medicating. That was very eye-opening to me. And, later, we have autoimmune problems in my family, and I have an autoimmune condition. And I was given some pretty hardcore pharmaceuticals to treat it, methotrexate, ones that they pretty much just say, like, this will heighten your risk of cancer. You could have organ failure. You'll feel terrible, and you'll basically be miserable all the time. That's kind of what the doctors tell you, and that's exactly what happened. I felt nauseous all the time, and the symptoms were not really that noticeably reduced. So I started experimenting with cannabis a little bit, and kind of found my special formula through microdosing and basically just taking a kind of clinical approach to my own wellness, learning about my body, what I respond to, what I don't respond to. And I've kind of been able to carve out my own therapy that works pretty well. I've been doing it for about 4 years in this current sense, and I think that I probably feel better than I have in the last decade. So
fascinating. All right, let's move on if we can, please, and let's talk about your firm, Goldleaf, its mission and vision, please.
Yeah. So what we do at Goldleaf is we make the science behind cannabis approachable and interesting. And while doing so, we always treat the subject with kind of a maturity and a respect. We don't utilize the stoner culture stereotypes, either the visuals or the wording. So we basically want to make make the subject beautiful and make it something that does not turn anybody off. It's a very polarizing subject. We do a lot of work in states where there are not legal measures yet. So we want to make sure that we're not turning anybody off, either with the way that we approach the subject or visually. So, and beyond that, Goldleaf is all about the user experience, merging kind of design and functionality. So our company focuses on educational materials, mostly journals, infographics, art prints, that kind of thing.
Right. So let's go back.
It is in the print world. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So let's go back to journaling, if you would, please. So we've talked to the audience at great length, given the FDA issues and the Schedule I dynamics of this. And the lack of understanding of many classic doctors of the space, how important it is to kind of self-regulate, to microdose, to determine what works for you as a user. And you mentioned how you kind of went on your own journey in this regard. I found some of your materials extremely helpful in that regard. So let's talk a little bit about journaling. And you've got journaling for both humans and animals. And if you could talk a little bit about both, that would be helpful, please.
Yeah. So we've got journals that cover all sorts of niche subjects in the cannabis space. You mentioned the one for pets as well as, for people. We've got ones that focus entirely on people with, more medical difficulties, and then ones that are more experiential. And basically, the approach there is that the best way to find out what works for you is experimentation. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. The endocannabinoid system in everybody is different, and there's no Google search query that's going to give you the answer. You just have to try it and see what works for you. So we try to make that process a little less intimidating and a little less frightful for people new to it. And so, that's kind of our approach with the medical side. We team up with physicians in the space and experts in the space, depending on the subject. And that's exactly what we did with the Pets Journal. We teamed up with Blooming Culture in Chicago, who's kind of a leader in pet CBD items. And they kind of were there for the assist with the final edits of that particular journal. And that educates the user about what to expect with their animal, dog or cat, or perhaps some other animals.
Sure, works great for horses too, doesn't it? Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. So, there's a little education specifically about that on the front, and then there are cues. We do a templated, guided approach in all of our journals. So we're telling you what to look for, what to write, and what will be helpful to reference in the future. We want this to be something that you can have actionable insights from, not just, an exercise in putting pen to paper. So that's kind of the goal there and the approach that we take with all of our journals. And like you said, journaling is very important if you're trying to identify specifics about your own condition, more so than apps, I would say, just because the act of journaling is meditative. It forces you to slow down as you're writing. Your brain is recomposing your thoughts, and it's actually improving your memory. There's less distractions by things like notifications or security risks. So, again, even though it's 2020, we chose to kind of have the vehicle of our work be paper,
right,
just because it is analog and it does have value in that sense.
And you could always move to an online version or an app version if you choose to at some point. So I just want to underscore for the audience kind of, in a simplified fashion. So I have a dog. My dog, who I love dearly, of course, like everybody's dog, is petrified when there's a thunderstorm coming. I have learned that pet CBD products are ideal, good ones, of course, for my dog. Of course, I can determine when a thunderstorm is coming because I got any number of weather apps that are describing it to me several hours in advance. I give my dog product, and I kind of look at how he reacts, okay? I've been journaling about it before I even understood that Goldleaf had a predefined journal which could walk me through that protocol. If my dog had other issues, other pains, other problems, we could do the same thing. I actually have a good friend of mine, college roommate, whose son has any number of challenges and has been using cannabis as prescribed, of course, by a doctor. He's in a medicinal state, therefore he must have a doctor's prescription. And then what the doctor has basically said to this individual is, okay, we're going to get you started, and then it's really up to you. So work your way through it, decide what works best, and kind of adjust as appropriate, which I find fascinating, right? I mean, in conventional medicine, when most of our listenership thinks of conventional medicine, they think of a doctor saying, here's 30 pills, take one a day in the morning, one in the evening, and come back and see me in 2 weeks. Nobody's saying, take a look and decide how much you should take, right? They're not suggesting kind of you work through it on your own, which, given the fact that in a medicinal state, there are still very few doctors that truly understand this space. And to your point earlier, the endocannabinoid system, which is what this stuff reacts to, is so unique in each individual person. You really need to kind of work it through on your own. And I found your journals extremely helpful. Let's move on for a minute. You take another issue apart in a fashion that I found very helpful. Talk a little bit about terpenes, what that means, if you would, please, to the space and to wellness, and how you've integrated it into your work, please.
Yeah, so, for your listeners out there, a quick overview of terpenes. They probably know this, but they're basically organic hydrocarbons found in the essential oils of basically all plants, and elsewhere. And they're what give cannabis or any botanical its aroma and, thus contribute to the flavor. So terpenes are interesting because they work synergistically with other compounds to affect change in the endocannabinoid system. So that's where you get some of the entourage effect, stuff like that. Terpenes have been used therapeutically for millennia. They're, hallmark of aromatherapy, as well as other homeopathic medicines. So they're certainly well understood and tested, probably more so than a lot of the cannabinoid compounds even today. So, and there are a whole bunch of terpenes. Some of them are going to be more prevalent in cannabis plants. Others will be more prevalent in other types of plants. But just because it exists in cannabis sativa does not mean that it's not present elsewhere. Let's see. Limonene is an example of one. It's got kind of citrusy notes, and it's normally known for being, kind of an antidepressant. It's energy giving. People who have a little limonene in their cannabis plants will kind of say that those attributes are a little more energetic. And, the same can go on down the list with all of the primary or secondary terpenes. And that's what's interesting right now is as genetics kind of flex and evolve, we're seeing different types of terpenes at different levels of concentrations in all sorts of new cultivars. So it's a really cool time to kind of be experiencing the cannabis universe.
Right. So just a couple of points for the audience. So this notion of terpenes has existed in homeopathy and in kind of what I'll call plant-based medicine for thousands of years, right? Yeah. It is becoming more and more relevant to the cannabis space because terpenes mean specific things, and they come in the form of the cannabis plant, and they can also be introduced into the product to add certain medicinal value as well as taste, right? So just last week we had Lou Sager from The Alchemist Kitchen on, and his whole business is about the power of plants, and he's got a lot of what I'll call non-cannabis products, homeopathic products that are addressing all kinds of things, headaches, sleep conditions, etc. And a lot of that is utilization of terpenes to bring about the desired effect. So tell us a little bit about how you have simplified it. You've got products that do that. I just bought one of those. Why don't you share with my audience what those are?
Yeah. The word, like all of the terpenes are kind of big, scary looking words that most people don't read normally. So it turns a lot of people off right out of the gates because it looks like something from chemistry class that they intentionally ignored or something. So what we do is we try to assimilate all of the kind of more common wordings that are out there, the more common primary terpenes, and show them in a kind of colorful, helpful way to kind of further educate either dispensaries or doctors or the individual about their value, their different scent profiles or their different therapeutic values. We also talk about when there might be a beneficial combination of cannabinoids and terpenes or multiple terpenes if you're looking to address a certain ailment or condition.
Righto. Now, you also have some cooking journals, which I found fascinating. If you could describe that just a little bit, please.
Yeah. Well, that's another example of us kind of nerding out on the niche. We really like, pretty much any... Is
that an academic term you learned in college, nerding out? Is that what that was?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's I guess been part of my vocabulary for a while.
Well, we appreciate that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the cooking journal is for those people who like to experiment with cannabis in the kitchen. It's a great delivery method for a lot of conditions, and it's a great delivery method for a lot of people who don't want to, smoke or vape or dab or do anything like that. They want a little bit more control over their dosing and more control over what product is getting into their food. So our journal kind of, starts out with a bunch of education on different things like decarboxylation, and then we have the guided templated pages for you to kind of write the recipes, like the core recipes or the different extractions or kind of concentrate recipes that you're doing. So slightly different layouts for those different pages, but that's kind of the idea. Giving somebody a tool who's maybe new to this stuff in the kitchen, or even an expert who wants to have space allotted for different data points that are important to keep in mind.
Righto. All right. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap this up shortly. But, many of our listeners are investors in the space, either as casual investors or players in the space that have built businesses and are making investments in their own companies and in other companies. A lot of the conversation that I've had with family offices, especially health-focused family offices, are that they are interested in the space, but they'd rather get into it through non-plant touching investments. So I think an organization like yours kind of embodies that in many ways. Are you currently raising money now, and what are your plans for growth?
We're a pretty small team here at Goldleaf, and we've never had to do any fundraising outside of our initial fundraising at our conception. But that said, we've been growing quickly enough where most of our team's a little frazzled and our bandwidth is kind of eaten up, and we do have plans to kind of seek out partnerships this year in 2020. So I don't know if any of your listeners are interested in talking more. They're welcome to reach out to us, and we can kind of talk through what we're looking for. But that's kind of where we're at, business-wise. As far as our plans for growth, we started out B2C, making stuff for the individual, and that's kind of evolved to about 60% of our time going toward B2B endeavors, and that is mostly custom work, custom educational pieces for dispensaries, organizations, business owners. Our team is very skilled in the marriage of design and information, making it pleasant. We understand the industry like I dare say nobody else does, at least in the design space. That's been the fastest growing part of our business is the kind of custom project creation and those larger contracts with companies like Canopy Growth and Humboldt Legends and stuff like that. So those are really fun for us because we're able to engage in the community a little bit more. We're able to kind of experiment with different types of design and information, and we're able to tackle subjects that we probably wouldn't do on our own right because the audience is kind of too small.
Sure. No, I understand that. So, I mean, I think your B2B business is yet again an impressive business, and it kind of opens you up to new education and new needs, and the skill base that you can bring to the table should make that an excellent fit. All right, so let me ask you this. We are running out of time. My producer here has given me the hook here. So
cool.
I always like to end every interview with kind of an open mic. We've got anywhere from 50 to 100,000 folks hopefully listening to this right now. What are your final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, well, first off, Jeffrey, I really appreciate you having us on. It's great that, you have a show like yours, NYCBD, raising awareness around the very, very confusing and kind of mixed up industry of medical cannabis, and especially the communicating of medical cannabis information. So kudos for that. And I guess my parting words would just be, everybody should be kind of diligent with their research. You're experimenting on your body with cannabis. You can't really Google these ideas and find an answer in like your top hit always. You've got to make sure that, sources are validated and, know where it's coming from. Like cannabis education is still in its infancy. So I guess that's my word of wisdom is just be diligent and check your sources.
Righto. So speaking of checking your sources, why don't you supply your website, please, so that my listenership can understand how to get a hold of you, please.
Our website is shopgoldleaf.com, all one word. If anybody is interested in reaching out to us, we're at hello@shopgoldleaf.com.
All right, Charlie, I want to thank you for your time today. I think that you've kind of opened up the minds of the audience, and certainly mine as well, to a new way to look at the space and a way to kind of simplify what is otherwise a pretty complex series of topics. As I mentioned in the kind of the due diligence that I was doing prior to our interview, I went ahead and got on your website, of course, and ordered several items, which I thought were incredibly well done. All right, so thanks again, Charlie. When we come back, we will move to the fourth segment of our show, Your Messages, right after this.
Are you waking up the day after a workout, tennis match, or even a long walk just feeling it? Introducing CBDeliveryNY.com to help you live the life you know you can. They carry superior CBD made from the highest quality hemp, grown and harvested under the strictest regulations. Their sales force, certified trainers, physical therapists, and yoga teachers, all of whom have gone through rigorous education, helping them to understand what the power of plants can do for your overall wellness. So start 2020 off right. Try one of their New Year's product bundles. Go to CBDeliveryNY.com. That's CBDeliveryNY.com to find out what the power of plants can do for you.
Welcome back to NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill. We're under a little bit of time pressure this week, so let's move on to the fourth segment of our show, responding to your messages with the best message that Flipsy pulled out of all that we received.
I hope it's good.
I'm sure it will be. This letter comes from Elizabeth in New Jersey. I am very intrigued with the plant-based wellness discussion you had with Lou Sager from Alchemist Kitchen. He talked about using the power of plants to address a number of issues I'm wrestling with. I have arthritis and trouble sleeping. I've been taking a number of conventional medications, but would like to try something more organic and plant-based. What do you recommend? Well, Elizabeth, I suggest you come to New York City and go visit the Alchemist Kitchen. The herbalists will listen to your issues and can recommend specific plant-based products they think will address your pain and sleep conditions. I'm personally a big believer in the power of plants, as you all know, because I have very similar issues. I have osteoarthritis and sleep challenges, and I've had very good success by using the product. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed today's show. And our guest, Charlie McElroy, CEO of Goldleaf, and, of course, Jay Contessa, now partner and head ambassador for CB Delivery. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate you coming.
Great show.
We'll be back next week for another 60 minutes of the critical issues facing cannabis and CBD, the financial implications, the political implications, and the societal implications. Remember, as I say every week, knowledge is built how? Brick by brick. Today you got my 38th brick. Until next week, this is NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill.